I'm Neil Doherty with North Country Whitetails, and welcome to DSI. You know, for years you've been reading about big bucks and some of the stories behind how they're harvested, but you never really got a full picture. In DSI, we're going to break it down in great detail and really give you the behind-the-scenes talk and understanding why deer do what they do. We're going to merge the deer stories with the science behind how the deer move, the food sources in the area, get up above and study aerial photography and really teach you how to use those techniques when it comes to your hunts this fall. This is a story of the Contamination Buck. Contamination Buck was killed with a bow, and it's really kind of a unique setup because the hunter was hunting in the big woods, and the big woods poses a lot of problems for bow hunters because there is a million different ways that deer can move through the property to food plots or around food plots, and it just creates a lot of stand locations that you have to try as you're trying to pick off these deer as they move through. In this case, the hunter was trying to target a 3-year-old animal. Now this is a 500-acre farm that had been managed for 4 or 5 years. There was a number of food plots on the property. This food plot was planted in brassica. There were smaller clover fields planted in the property. Again, more brassica and food complexes on the southeastern side of the property. So there's lots of food, and there was also lots of bedding sanctuary. In through this center section here, the timber had been thinned, the canopy was opened up, and the regeneration of brambles and briars and young trees was there. It made it extremely thick, and this is a spot the hunters hadn't gone in 4 or 5 years, and they knew that there was good deer bedding in this sanctuary, and with the use of cameras, they were starting to pick up the deer as they were working in and out of these food plots. Problem was, they would photograph the deer heading in and out of the food plots, but from stand locations on the edge of these food plots, they weren't seeing any of the older age class deer. You'd hunt on the edge of this 3-acre field and you'd see 3 or 4 different bucks every evening showing up to chase the does, but nothing that was 3 years of age or older. It was all immature bucks using the fields. So as the season progressed, the hunter became more and more frustrated as to why he wasn't connecting with his deer, and decided, as it's a good case and a lot of times, to pull out a map and really see what he had been doing. And he pulled up a map and then started to draw circles of contamination. He called it contamination based on when he showed up and hunted an area. So if he had a stand location, like there was one back in this brush lot near this food plot that had been hunted 4 or 5 times, very boldly outlined this area, everything that he could see and everywhere that his scent had interfered with, including the track and how he walked in and out of that stand. By drawing contamination circles around the property and what he could see, he very quickly started to find that there was gaps within these contamination areas that the deer could move through. Now these spots, there wasn't trails, there wasn't any sign that lots of deer were using them, but there were definite gaps where deer could move through the property as they snuck in and around the known hunting locations, traveling back and forth. So back to the Contamination Buck. This particular 10-pointer had been photographed up on the top end of this farm, working in some of the food plots that were located about 500 yards away from this bedding sanctuary. It was the last day of the bow season. There's a few guys in camp that would be hunting with guns the next couple days. So he had 4 archery hunters in camp, kind of a full camp. He had a meeting with the guys in camp and said, hey, let's try to hunt a little bit different today. We'll go out early, we'll sit all day, but let's sit in the spots that are in between where we haven't sat yet and just see what happens. He went out with climbing stands. He was able to convince a couple of his buddies to hunt that way, and a few of the other guys said, you know, the heck with you, I'm going to go sit in the food plot and see 15 deer tonight and shoot a big one. So as time rolled through and as this hunt started to play out, the hunter picked a location just to the west of this big large field here. He walked from camp location down an access road up into the woods and hung a climbing stand. Again, no sign. There was a rub that was present there, but no sign that any deer were moving through. But he had hunted in this location, he had hunted in this location, and as a natural spot for the deer to get from this sanctuary up to those bigger fields up on top, he had to move through here somewhere, and hope was he'd be moving in between those 2 spots that had been hunted. He had a buddy of his that said he was going to sit right on the edge of this field and watch the parade in the evening. Another buddy of his decided that he would come in from the other side of the farm and moved in and sat in another spot in between known contaminated areas and see if he could intercept the buck as the buck was leaving the sanctuary. Now there was 4 or 5 of these 3-year-old class bucks that were working the farm. The goal was to try to intercept this 10-pointer, but hey, any of those 3-year-olds would have worked. As the evening progressed, at 3:30 in the afternoon, out walks the 10-pointer and walks right past his buddy at 35 yards. Now, the buck was parading like there wasn't a care in the world as he moved through the property. Didn't offer a shot, it was too far away, but as he moved through, he turned left and started ahead to the guy that was up on this point. Again, a tremendous amount of distance, almost 500 yards between these two hunters. So as the evening progressed, the buck dropped into this hollow. He moved along, and this would be the kind of the hypothetical path this buck had to take because there was other hunters in the woods or other camps. This is where the buck was forced to move. As the buck moved across on a west-northwest wind, he would have moved to this point of the property, smelled the hunter that was sitting up in this tree stand that saw 4 bucks that evening and about 10 other does in this field, smelled the hunter in that stand, said, "Thank you very much, I appreciate you going back to the spot you've always been going," dropped back into the thick stuff, scent checking, moved along, drifted around the high side of the plot, drifted right back up into within about 50 to 75 yards of, again, the hunter that was sitting up in this ladder stand that had been here for a number of years, made a hard right-hand turn, and up over the ridge he went. And the hunter, sitting up on this ridge in between the two contaminated areas, about 15 minutes before the shooting light ended, crunch, 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 up came through the deer, and he had a great shot at 8 yards and made a good shot, and the deer piled up. So it was a good hunt. Now, the interesting thing was the only deer that the hunter saw that was hunting in this open space, and the only deer that the hunter saw that was hunting in this open space was that 3-year-old, nice 10-pointer. And he simply had been for probably weeks on end moving and snaking in and out of the property, back and forth and around in the open spaces in between the known stand locations, happily moving through checking for does and surviving without getting close to any of the hunters. So when you're struggling towards the tail end of the season, you've put quite a bit of pressure on the property, maybe take a page out of the book here and hunt the spots that you haven't hunted before. It could be all you need to do to have success this season.